Hello and welcome to episode 333 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Hello, Ian. How was your week?
It's going really well, Jason. Do you know why it's going really well?
Why? Oh, wait, I know. Because the kids are back in school.
The kids are back in school!
See, I knew it. I can hear a difference in your voice. You sound more well-rested.
I don't know if I'm more well-rested, but I'm certainly enjoying the return to normalcy around here after the crazy days of summer. But we had a good summer, and now I'm ready for fall. I'm also counting down the days to Dorkfest, less than a month away. So I'm excited about that.
How did that happen?
If you're planning on joining us in Los Angeles on the 13th of September, be sure to RSVP to Dorkfest. There's no cost, there's no tickets or anything, but you can't win the raffle prizes this year unless you RSVP in advance. So do that, and we'll see you there in less than a month. The should have been an incredibly serious accident, but miraculously wasn't list grows longer thanks to the final report issued for the Marathon Airlines flight that was operating on behalf of Air Serbia in February 2024. This was an E195 operated by Marathon Airlines departing Belgrade, or trying to depart Belgrade. They did so many things wrong trying to get this aircraft off the ground. And they, I mean the pilots, did so many things wrong that it is truly miraculous that no one was injured.
And there were so many opportunities to not do the wrong thing, and all were either ignored or just, I don't know, willfully ignored here?
The captain of this aircraft does not come off in a good light.
No. And
in any way, shape, or form.
If I recall correctly, Air Serbia terminated its partnership with Marathon Airlines almost immediately after
they sure did.
This incident as well.
They sure did. So here's what happened to refresh everyone's memory. The aircraft overran the end of the runway during the takeoff roll, collided with the localizer antenna, had a tail strike along a long length of grass after the end of the runway, and ripped a giant gash in the fuselage, the left fuselage, just forward of the wing root, as well as the wing root fairing, the wing itself. There were all sorts of damage to this aircraft.
It was another one of those incidents that proves the E-Jet family's past history of just being an absolute unit, an absolute tank that can take just about anything.
Yes. So here's what happened before all that happened. The investigation found that the aircraft lined up at the wrong intersection. That was kind of the first part of it. They entered the runway at Delta 5 when they should have entered the runway at Delta 6. Entering the runway at Delta 6 as they were supposed to would have provided them with 2,300 meters of available takeoff space. Entering the runway at Delta 5 left them with only 1,200 meters of takeoff space, less than the distance required for the aircraft.
If only they had realized their error before they started the takeoff. Oh, wait, no.
They didn't even need to realize that error, Jason. They didn't need to realize that error. Because ATC said, hey, maybe don't do that. We don't think it's going to work. You can turn off, you can taxi again, and you can try the right intersection. The captain then said, we've got plenty of runway, and I'll recalculate this. However, he recalculated it wrong. The first officer noted that it was wrong, The captain said, "It's fine. We're going to do it anyway." Throughout the report, it's noted that the captain displayed superior attitude and exerted pressure on the first officer. Then they go from the wrong intersection, way overweight for a successful takeoff there. And it's not like they said, "Oh," or I suppose this really rests on the captain's shoulders. It's not like the captain said, "Oh, we're short on the runway. I will use all the available power I have to get us off the runway." Oh, no.
Nah, let's do a nice derated thrust takeoff, and it'll be fine.
And that's exactly what they did. And as they accelerated down the runway, they eventually realized, hey, this probably isn't going to work.
Yeah, apparently the report says that among the many discrepancies, when they took the wrong taxiway and were supposed to be taking off from runway 30 left at the D6 intersection, they changed their calculations to be the opposite direction, 12 right at the Delta 5 intersection, which apparently would have given them plenty of available runway for takeoff, 2,266 meters, and they were more than 1,000 meters off here. So this was never going to work. And what really brings it all together for me is that the crew should have been intimately familiar with this airport. They were operating for an airline on behalf of the airline based at that airport. So they were in and out of here, presumably, all day, every day. They should have known just instinctively, without even having to plug into the box to find out what their available runway and weight is, that, hey, this isn't right, this can't work. Literally every opportunity to prevent this incident from happening, unfortunately, was not taken up on.
Yeah, and even more that had gone wrong is the crew didn't perform a departure briefing. They had significant discrepancies in the performance data between what the aircraft could actually do and what they assumed the aircraft could do. They did not notice those errors because they didn't do the departure briefing. And there was no cross-check to catch any of those errors.
No, it's a textbook example of CRM, crew resource management, not breaking down, but seemingly not being applicable whatsoever.
The report is also interesting for what happened after the aircraft somehow safely returned to the airfield. The aircraft, which had smashed through the ILS array, had a fuel leak. Instead of isolating the aircraft because it was leaking fuel, they had it park at a gate.
I mean, not great. Maybe they didn't know the extent of the damage, but...
Okay, so the crew did not know the extent of the damage. That is true. But the ARF crews that were there surely saw the fuel leak. And so the report discusses some improvements that can be made to their emergency responses, Belgrade. And those, to their credit, have already been put into place.
So good luck all around when seemingly was everything was against the odds of there being a positive, okay outcome here. So, not great. Didn't know that last bit. That was not in the article I had read.
Yeah. Thankfully, I was able to get the report, which is in Serbian only, translated into English. But yeah, I will put a link in the show notes to the report, as well as the photos that are from the report. Those are thankfully self-explanatory if you have a moment to look through that. In more recent news, a NORRA ATR operating for Finnair, that aircraft came out of maintenance and was set to fly again, and unfortunately, it's going right back into maintenance.
For probably longer than it was in maintenance for previously. Turns out when you don't set the parking brake and the engines are in this case quite literally turning, anything in the way it's gonna cut right through and then destroy itself in the process.
Like a ground power unit, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, now we know what's inside a ground power unit. It turns out just like a diesel truck engine.
Yeah, I mean that's basically yes what it is. And now they're also down one GPU because of this particular incident. So it'll be interesting to see. The preliminary indications are that the parking brake was not set when the engines were on, which led to this particular incident. Thankfully, no one was injured. There was no damage to the interior of the cabin, thankfully. But it'll be interesting to see what this report lays out in a bit more detail and how this all occurred. So we'll keep an eye out for that one and come back to it. Last week, we said we hoped that the Air Canada flight attendants strike would be averted before it occurred. That was not the case. However, it is over in time for us to discuss the results.
Well, sort of over.
Sort of over. Air Canada flight attendants went on strike or announced their intention to strike. This was something that, maybe Jason, you've got an opinion about this because I'm describing the situation. Air Canada flight attendants announced their intention to strike at 12:30 a.m. At 1, the airline locked out the flight attendants. And so there were certainly partisan reasons for describing what was happening as either a strike or a lockout, depending on which side of the labor aisle you wanted to take. I was trying to accurately describe the situation, and I thought that strike was the way to go because that's what happened first. But there was some disagreement. I'm wondering if you have any input on this.
It's like saying you can't fire me because I quit. Kind of that same dynamic. Like it was going to happen anyway, but Air Canada kind of, I guess, pulled the trigger first.
I don't know, but in any case, the two sides went away, and then Air Canada said we're canceling our flights and shutting down the airline. As you know, from this point on, the government said, flight attendant union, get back to work. The strike is we're basically forcing you back to work. The flight attendant said no and defied that order to get back to work. The strike or lockout, whichever we're calling it, lasted then 3 days before the two sides reached an agreement early Tuesday morning on the 19th of August. Air Canada is working its way back to being an airline. First flights went out yesterday afternoon, Tuesday afternoon after they reached agreement on Tuesday morning, though the airline is going to be all sorts of bad news for the next couple of weeks as things get back into it. This is a tentative agreement that the flight attendant union still needs to vote on.
Given how overwhelmingly in favor of a strike flight attendants were, what was it, like 97.5% or something?
No, I think it was 99.7%.
Yeah, some astronomically, improbably high number. It's going to be very interesting to see if the flight attendants, if the union members vote in favor of this deal. This felt a lot less of just an isolated flight attendant go on strike at airline situation to much more of kind of a movement in Canada that it really got a lot of play and that people were really behind the flight attendants here in a way that you don't ordinarily see in a labor dispute, that it kind of became a symbol of pay inequality and employees wanting to get what they think they deserve, and I'm sure they do deserve it. In a lot of cases, flight attendants are ridiculously underpaid. So the strike itself really seemed to get more legs and more play than a strike ordinarily would have. And maybe that's because Air Canada's basic or a near monopoly in Canada. If you're flying internationally and you're flying on a Canadian airline, it's almost certainly Air Canada. And Air Canada does not have a stellar reputation with the Canadian people. It was very interesting to see how involved just ordinary people got in this and backing the flight attendant. So at this stage, the airline is slowly resuming operations, but there's still, from what I'm hearing, a lot of what Air Canada is calling illegal job action, in that flights that ordinarily at this point would have resumed are not resuming or being canceled because some flight attendants are still not reporting to work or calling out sick or they're just not showing up. So things are still pretty dicey at Air Canada right now. So I'm not super hopeful they're going to vote in favor of whatever contract the union cooked up. But this one was just overall a lot stickier of a strike than we typically see with an airline.
I think one of the big factors that influenced the attention that was paid to this particular strike was the fact that Air Canada's flight attendant union was arguing for ground pay. And I think a lot of people that heard that said, wait, what?
Which is not the norm for the industry at all.
No, I think most people outside the industry
don't know that.
Assume that when flight attendants are working for the airline, they're being paid. I think that's just a general kind of how the world works assumption. And then when confronted with the fact that no, flight attendants, generally speaking, at most airlines are only paid once the aircraft door is closed, then that comes as that just doesn't seem fair. And I think that's where kind of the weight and the attention for this came from. To that end, the agreement includes ground pay. And to note, the previous agreement that Air Canada was offering the flight attendants union also included ground pay. This agreement would include at least 60 minutes of ground pay for the time before each flight at a rate of 50% of the flight attendant's hourly rate. And that rate would increase at 5% per year for the life of the contract. Separately, standard pay increases of 12% for flight attendants that have been working for Air Canada for less than 5 years, or 8% for those who have been with the airline for 5 or more years would take effect immediately. And then those base pay rates would also increase 3% in the second year, 2.5% in the third year, and 2.75% in the fourth year of the contract. So we'll see if they vote on that or vote, positively on that. They still need to vote on the contract. But the article that I read in, I think it was the Globe and Mail, said that the contract, what the flight attendants were voting on is only the pay increases. It's not the ground pay. So I guess that doesn't require a separate vote on their part. All that said, WestJet, which is basically the other half of Canada's air transport system, their flight attendants have a contract that expires later this year.
They've got real good precedent now to get whatever those guys got.
So this will be interesting to see does the ground pay stop in Canada? Or does this become something that expands to other airlines that do not offer their flight attendants pay when they are working on the ground?
Yep.
An interesting time to be part of airline labor relations. Although when is it not, Jason? When is it not?
That is true, but it is not often that we see the threats of a strike actually culminate in an actual strike and then government mandating that those employees return to work and those employees saying, you know what? No, we're not going to do that. I say kudos to the Air Canada flight attendants for defying that order and kind of making it a movement that the Canadian people really got behind, and seeing the union members of the flight attendants here really representing like your ordinary employee, that they don't want to be told by the government to get back to work when they don't have a fair deal. So good for them.
You know what's not good?
So many things. You got to be more specific than that.
Booking a window seat and having no window.
I love window seat. Oh, no window seat. Yes.
Yeah. Window seat.
I have fallen for that trap before, and it is not enjoyable. And we're not talking about a 787 where the flight attendants, after all the nice glowing things we just said, when the flight attendants block out the windows so you can't adjust the dimming and you can't see out the window. No, we are talking about when there is physically no window in a particular row. And I'm really thinking about 737s, was it row like 11 or 13 typically?
Well, there's the famous 11A on Ryanair. and thereabouts on any other airline offering, the 737 as part of its fleet. What's interesting here is that United and Delta are now being sued, not for having an air conditioning duct in the side of the aircraft that keeps most people on board alive.
You need
that's
those.
not why they're
That's
being
good.
sued. They're being sued because they charge extra for those seats and label them as window seats and don't tell anyone that there's no window there. And the argument that the plaintiffs are making is that why on earth would I spend extra money to book a window seat specifically that doesn't have a window?
When the airline is specifically calling it a window seat. So even I am uniquely qualified to chime in on this particular answer. I work a lot with the data behind the scenes to power shopping displays that would tell passengers whether or not there is a window in that particular seat. And like most things, there are legacy systems and issues in place from sometimes displaying that information. But I would say to whoever is suing United and Delta, good. This is something that the airline should be held accountable for, because the infrastructure and the data and the displays to say that although this is a window seat, there is no window. It exists. Some airlines, like we mentioned, Ryanair, actually do that. If you go to Ryanair.com, you select seat 11A, it will show this seat does not have a window. And Ryanair is very upfront and replying to people on social media that, hey, we told you so. This is your fault. But the ecosystem doesn't always work out the way you would hope. There are codes that called PADIS codes. I don't remember what PADIS means at the moment, but they're industry standard codes. And there is several codes actually for windowless window seat, something along those lines. The problem comes when airlines either outright don't code that information, or they code it improperly, or they use a custom code that nobody knows what it means, or those codes in the distribution ecosystem just get dropped somewhere. So I looked at a case recently, I think it was United, where one major distribution system showed the code for windowless window seat, but the other one did not. I don't know why. There are a whole host of reasons for that particular case, but the infrastructure exists to do this. There are limitations, there are issues, but if it's a big enough issue, it can and should be solved by the industry, because there's nothing worse than ending up in a windowless window seat. But to market a seat as a window seat and charge potentially hundreds of dollars for it when it turns out there is no window there, that's not great. And we should, as an industry, be better than that.
Jason, when I saw this, I knew that you were going to have insight, and I'm grateful for that.
Fantastic. I can even find the code for windowless window seat, and it is Control F window. Oh, not so. Code 4, because 4 is not a window seat, and then there is, here we go, window seat without window is code WA. There's also window seat without window 1W. So these codes exist. IATA and all the other parts of the ecosystem have thought about this, and there are standards for this, but you know what a standard is. If people don't follow the standard, it's useless and a waste of time. So hopefully more airlines will play nicely and follow the standard and code these things so people don't end up in a windowless window seat.
Well, we talked about this a few weeks ago, and now it has come to pass. Turkish Airlines has offered to acquire a minority stake in Air Europa for approximately 300 million euros, so about $350 million. We don't know what percentage stake that offers them, but we do know that it is a minority stake. We expect this deal to close subject to standard governmental approvals and whatnot within 6 to 12 months. So this was after everyone else said, all right, we're done with Air Europa. And Turkish said, we think we can make this work. Here's 300 million euro.
Okay. I'm glad they found someone to give them some money. This has gone on since before COVID.
This has been going on for about a decade. I mean, which is just crazy to me, how long it has taken to get here. And we ended up with Turkish Airlines, which I don't think anyone expected, 6 months ago, let alone 5 years. So whatever. Good luck to them, and hopefully they can do something good with the money.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of money, go look at Norse. They said this week that they're looking at full year profitability for this year, mainly because they're giving half their fleet to Indigo.
Oh,
But
okay.
hey, it's working.
Great. So they'll still be around when I try to fly them next month.
Exactly. So they have they have a total of 12 787-9s. 6 of those are going to be leased to Indigo as it begins its aggressive long-haul expansion in anticipation of its own long-haul aircraft on delivery. The other 6 will continue to fly directly for Norse. Then they said something extremely interesting to me. They said aircraft are too expensive to buy and they're too expensive to charter, so we are just going to stay where we are.
Okay.
So I'm very interested in that.
Yeah. That's I'm happy for Norwegian.
This is smart.
For all of the let's just say crap we have given Norse Atlantic over the years of saying this is just Norwegian with a different paint job, with the same planes and the same interior and the same throw a dart at the map route network, they've cracked the code. Just, for the most part, don't actually be your own airline and just have airplanes that other people use. And also run a little operation of your own. That was not what Norwegian did. So Norse is indeed something else.
And
proving us wrong.
Yeah, and to that point, Play is also in the late stages of transitioning into its not Norwegian, not old Norwegian and not old WoW. They are completing their transition from Icelandic-based transatlantic connector between North America and Europe into a European holiday destination airline. They've almost moved everything out. They're going to keep a few aircraft in Iceland, but those aircraft are going to be operating on behalf of other airlines. So that is them saying, okay, that business model didn't work. And we're switching, and it seems to be working for them. So good for all of them.
Yeah,
finding a way to make this work.
Less convinced in Play's transition here. This was pretty much scrap your entire business model and just move everything over to mainland Europe, where there is still a ton of competition. I mean, Play is no Jet2 Holiday, so they've got a very, very highly competitive market to deal with here, whereas Norse is kind of just giving up half its fleet for cash, which is probably much better. Cold hard cash.
Well, as long as we're talking about cash, we might as well talk about Allegiant, because they've lost a bunch of cash. So much so that the pilots union is looking to hold a no confidence vote against the management and board of directors to try and get rid of them. They say, quote, years of repeated failures, poor strategic decisions, and reckless spending have threatened the long-term health and stability of the airline.
So things like opening up their own resort in Florida that I think they've actually taken their branding off of already, things like that.
They have sold that to Blackstone, and they lost $500 million. They also had a NASCAR team.
I mean, who doesn't have one of those?
Well, that's true. So yeah, the pilots union at Allegiant is looking to hold a no confidence vote to get rid of management and the board of directors. In the first half of the year, Allegiant lost $33 million. So not a huge loss, but mounting.
Yeah, Allegiant is firmly an ultra low cost carrier, but seemingly the only one, even in the LCC space, from JetBlue to Southwest to Spirit to Frontier, that has paid no attention whatsoever to the premiumification of low-cost and ultra-low-cost flights in the U.S., where passengers want something better than the bare minimum. Allegiant has seemingly, at least externally, done absolutely nothing to acknowledge that. Allegiant is today, as it was 5 years ago, minus some very old Mad Dogs. They're all Airbus now, and I guess there are some Maxes as well. But Allegiant has bucked that trend, and apparently they should probably not have done that. And if everyone else is doing something and chasing that revenue, maybe you should be doing that too.
Or just not starting a hotel.
There's that. Apparently, they still offer Allegiant Stadium football fan packages, whatever that might be. That's the Vegas Stadium, right?
I believe so.
Okay, so they're still not out of the distractions entirely, but not great.
Oh, what fun! So we'll keep an eye on this one to see if this goes forward and if anything changes. This story comes to us from Ukraine and it just gets more bizarre the more that I read about it. And so I wasn't going to share this one because I was like, oh, that seems like a documentation for some parts. I was like, okay, not super interesting because it's just a couple of old 737s. But no, it gets better because you end up with models of fake CFM56 engines. So here's what happened.
What?
Trans Air Congo sent a pair of 737s, a 737-300 and a 737-500 to Kyiv in December of 2021 for scheduled heavy maintenance. Well, 3 months later, Ukraine was invaded by Russia.
I remember that.
And so their plans were interrupted. Both of the aircraft were damaged because they were at Hostomel Airport. They were damaged in the initial invasion when Russian forces were trying to take the airfield. After Ukraine was able to reestablish control, they found that a large number of the parts that had been taken off the aircraft as part of the maintenance were now missing. Jason, including the 2 CFM56 engines that came off the 737-500.
Well, where did those go?
Well, the court is now looking.
You can't just sneak those out in your pocket. You've got to have a pretty big pocket to hide those. Where'd they go?
You've heard the Johnny Cash song "One Piece at a Time." I rest my case.
Oh no.
The employees that are under investigation submitted forged certificates for the decommissioning of the aircraft in order to clear customs. The engines were replaced by fakes that had fake serial numbers inputted in an attempt to bypass the customs declarations for the real engines.
Well, how fake are we talking here?
No one knows where these are.
I mean, how fake were the decoy engines? Were they like Legos or just like some old
No, they were basically like we built it up enough to make it look kind of like an engine, but the moment that you actually look closer than, 5 feet
so
away.
Like Boeing did with the original 787 rollout.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
Like, don't look too close because it's not a real airplane.
I was going to go with the Town and Blazing Saddles, but I like yours as more germane example.
A little more on topic.
Yeah. The 737-300 also cleared inspection with fake documents. The engine...
Wait, so nobody knows where these engines are?
Well, no one knows where the engines from the 737-500 are, but the engines from the 737-300 are likely in Odessa in a warehouse. And so there's an investigation going on in Kyiv to find out where these things went.
Well, they're always in the last place you look.
So that'll be an interesting thing to see. To close out the show, I tried to be funny on social media.
Never do that.
And it backfired. It backfired in ways that I did not expect because I didn't know how many clickbait weather sites there are.
What? That's a thing?
That's a thing. There apparently are these like storm chasing clickbait weather sites.
What did you do? What did you do? Tell me what you did.
So here's the thing. I should have been much more specific in my questioning of what was going on. Because Spirit Airlines, they flew into the geographic area of the storm. At 37,000 feet, they were likely over the top of the storm. They were also on the southwest side of the storm, which puts them in the weakest wind area. That said, the flight path in the vicinity of the hurricane was highly unusual because it's not like they flew through straight shot. It's not like they were, on a path, on an airway. They knew what they were, they knew where they were headed. This path took them away from the center of the storm, then basically swung them directly into the center of the storm before they made a 90-degree turn out of the storm. So I have questions about why that flight path exists in the first place. And I made the joke, did Spirit take up the Hurricane Hunter mission?
Okay, not the unique joke the first time we've heard that one before, but
not a unique joke. However, it got picked up in two different directions. One by these aforementioned weather clickbait sites, which the internet gets worse and worse and worse. But I also got a lot of angry mail from pilots, dispatchers, and things like that, explaining the science of no, they're not flying through the storm. That's why Hurricane Hunters are flying at 10,000 feet, not 37,000. They were likely over the storm tops, et cetera, et cetera. I'm less interested in that discussion because that wasn't what I was trying to say, but I am interested in this flight path itself. So I'll put a link to the flight in the show notes. If anyone has any idea why this flight path occurred, I'd be very interested to know what happened. So if you're a Spirit pilot or dispatcher and you're listening, fill us in, please.
Yeah, I looking back at the post, which I did not see the other day, that they kind of went to the outer edge of the hurricane and made a gradual left turn for not the edge of the hurricane. Again, making another U-turn. A very strange, not direct path to where they were going. But Ian, if I have learned anything about airplanes and hurricanes, is that when you take a picture of airplanes doing things around hurricanes, they get traction. This a callback to what was it, like 2018 when there was that Delta flight going to San Juan, racing the hurricane. Yes. But that was, that was an actual legitimate race. They were trying to beat a hurricane. In this case,
they were in between the two bands.
It was quite impressive. This case, it was just, a weird flight path. Not sure why they would do that. But again, like those pilots and other people who yelled at you, hurricanes don't have that high at top. So it is perfectly fine and ordinary to fly over them. You just don't usually see flights doing zigzag patterns over them because you want to spend as little time as possible over them. So if you have an emergency or whatever, you can land somewhere that isn't experiencing
a hurricane.
Yeah, that would be nice. But I'm just happy it was you for a change getting some flack and not me.
And not you. Fair enough. All right, Jason, I will let you get back to whatever meetings and things you've got going on this week in Washington. I thank you for taking time out to record this.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even talk about that. How that? I tried to fly down to Dulles again, and yet again, it did not happen.
Well, let's save that discussion for next week. We'll see if you make it.
No, I never want to talk about it again. No, I'm taking Amtrak.
Fair enough. All right. This has been episode 333 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening.